Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. This month, Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem reported that they broke their record with a number of 1,823 births in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in the month of October. Now, the reason for this partially is because a lot of people have been evacuated from the south and therefore gave birth in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. But the number 1,823, 18 of course represents Chai, life, and 23 is the year we're in. And it's a message that Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, will live on and build a future with new generations, which is very much connected to this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. But it begins in the very opening with the story of the passing of Sarah. Sarah dies and is buried in Hebron in the opening of this week's Torah portion. And the question is, how do you call a Torah portion that begins with the death of Sarah the life of Sarah? And the answer is that every person has two lives, the physical life and the spiritual life. Our physical life is finite and limited. We get a certain amount of defined years to live in this world. But our spiritual life, which is our legacy, our values, our embodiment of what we lived for, our Judaism, our heritage, that is transmitted to our children and lives on forever through them and their children's children for all future generations. And therefore the Torah says, yes, Sarah dies, but it's the life of Sarah, because she left behind a son like Isaac who carried forward her teachings, her life lessons, her example, and her legacy for all future generations until the Jewish nation today, which carries on the life of Sarah. And this is also expressed in the next verse of the Torah portion. It says, when Sarah dies, Abraham comes to eulogize Sarah and to weep over her. And the word velip kosa, which means to cry over her, has a small minimized chaf in the middle of the word, which means that in the Torah there's the standard size of the letters, the font, but sometimes God said write a big letter and sometimes a small letter, and it's reflected in our Torah scrolls and in the printed Chumash. And in the Torah, the letter Chaf in the middle of the word, and he cried for her, is small. And our rabbis ask, why is it a small Chaf? What does that teach us? And our rabbis explain it teaches us that, yes, Abraham wept over his wife Sarah at her funeral, but his crying, his weeping, was minimized somewhat by the fact that he knew that she would live on through Isaac, that she transmitted her goodness, her kindness, her faith in God to her son successfully. She was a role model for her son, and he would carry her life forward, and therefore her death was not without fulfillment of her purpose of accomplishing her mission in this world. And having come back from Israel, we found that it was the most painful trip to witness the sadness and the grief of so many people in Israel. But at the same time, there's a strength and a joy in the faith and the confidence that their suffering is not in vain. As the psalmist says, Hazorim b'dima, those who plant with tears, berina yiktsaru, will reap with joy. That there will be a joy that will come from this sadness. And wherever we went, this is what we heard and this is what we saw. When we landed in Tel Aviv, in Ben Gurion, we went straight to Tel HaShomer Hospital. The first meeting we had was with a young soldier by the name of Noam, 20 years old. We found him sitting in a wheelchair in the hospital with one leg. And he told us his story how the morning of October 7th, he ran out to fight the terrorists. He says he was feet away from the terrorists. He looked evil in the eye, and he shot so many terrorists and killed so many of them. But one of them managed to shoot him in the leg, and he lost a lot of blood, and they had to amputate his leg. And I said to him, Ata Gibor, you're a hero. And he said, no, I'm not a hero. He says, my friends who died defending Israel, they're the heroes. I just gave a leg. And he said to me these words. He said, I was ready to die. I have no problem with that. But at the end, I only had to sacrifice a leg. And you ask yourself, how could a person be so accepting of living the rest of their life with one leg? And the answer is they know that their sacrifice was not in vain. They think of all the lives they saved and how they fulfilled their purpose and their mission to protect Jewish lives by killing terrorists. And therefore they get strength and they get comfort from that. Like Abraham, they're crying, but at the same time, they feel a sense of purpose in what they achieved, and therefore that minimizes their sadness. And this is what we saw at the funerals. This is what we saw when we went to the Shiva homes. Over and over again, people said to us, our children didn't die in vain. They died. They gave their lives, but they'll live on through all the lives of the people that they saved. And this is the strength of the Jewish people, that we know that our lives have meaning and purpose, that we're in a moment of history that our ancestors have gone through so many times. But tragically, our enemies have killed Jews indiscriminately for thousands of years. But Jews never had the ability to defend themselves, to fight back, to give an answer to this anti-Semitism. But for the first time, perhaps, in close to 2,000 years, we're not just going to be murdered by crusades and pogroms and holocausts and inquisitions, but we're going to answer this, and we're going to do it bravely, and we're going to respond and saying, Jewish blood is not cheap anymore. We're going to fight back. And those who are on the front line sacrificing their lives are weeping over their losses and their tragedy, but at the same time are comforted by the knowledge that their sacrifices are fulfilling a promise to all past and future generations that the Jewish people will live on, and never again will we allow our enemies to murder us as they did for thousands of years. This is the comfort and the strength that we find in these most difficult times. Every one of us, whether we live in Israel or here, could find their voice, can find their calling, can find their mission to play a role in this critical moment and make our personal sacrifices, whatever that may be, to help in the defeat of evil and the victory of the Jewish people. Have a wonderful day.